The billionaire slammed the car door so hard that the sound echoed across the marble driveway of his mansion. "You're fired, Samuel!" Ethan Cole shouted, his voice sharp and cold like the winter air. Samuel, the old black driver who had served him faithfully for 12 long years, stood silently beside the sleek black Rolls-Royce. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from exhaustion. He looked up at his employer with tired, gentle eyes. "Sir," he said softly, "please, just give me a chance to explain." But Ethan wasn't listening. His jaw was tight, his phone still in his hand, his face red with frustration. He had just lost a multi-million-dollar deal that morning, and his temper was boiling. "You were supposed to be here at 7 sharp. It's 9. Do you even understand what on time means?" Samuel swallowed his pride, his voice shaking a little. I had to make a quick stop, sir. It was important." "Important?" Ethan snapped, stepping closer. "You think your life is more important than my meeting with investors? Do you even realize how much money I lost because of your irresponsibility?" A long silence followed. The morning sun glared off the hood of the car. Samuel straightened his shoulders and took a quiet breath. Then, with a calmness that almost felt sacred, he replied, "Sir, I hope one day you'll understand why I was late." Ethan froze for a split second. The words hit something deep inside him, though he didn't know why. But pride kept him from showing it. "Get off my property," he said coldly, "and don't ever come back." Samuel nodded once, his eyes glistening. Then he turned and walked away, slow, heavy steps echoing down the driveway, his old leather shoes leaving faint prints on the cold stone. He didn't look back. Ethan stood there for a moment, watching him disappear past the gates. He felt a strange emptiness, but quickly brushed it off. "Good riddance," he muttered, and stormed inside. The house. From the balcony above, his teenage son Daniel had witnessed everything. The boy's face was pale. "Dad," he began softly, "you didn't have to—" But Ethan cut him off. "Not now, Daniel. I have work to do." Daniel's lips quivered. "He's been with us since Mom was alive," he whispered, but his father had already turned away. Hours later, the mansion was silent. Ethan sat in his office trying to drown himself in spreadsheets and calls, yet his mind kept replaying Samuel's last words. "One day, sir, you'll understand why I was late." He sighed, irritated at himself. "Why am I even thinking about him?" he muttered. But deep down, something in his chest felt heavy, a kind of guilt he hadn't felt in years. Before we continue this emotional story, tell us in the comments, from which country are you watching, and what time? Is it right now? If stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us create more beautiful, meaningful tales like this one. That night, as Ethan switched off the lights and walked toward his empty bedroom, he passed by the garage. The driver's cabin door was still half open. Inside lay Samuel's old wool cap, folded neatly on the seat, as if waiting for its owner to return. Ethan paused. For a brief second, he considered picking it up, but instead, he turned away. He didn't know yet. The man he had just fired was the same man who had been saving his family all along. The next morning, Ethan Cole's mansion felt strangely quiet. No footsteps in the hallway, no polite knock on the door, no familiar voice saying, "Good morning, sir. The car's ready." For the first time in 12 years, Samuel Brooks wasn't there. Ethan tried to ignore it. He told himself that a driver was replaceable, that it didn't matter. But as the hours passed, a strange discomfort began to creep in. The housekeeper accidentally brewed Ethan's coffee too strong, and the newspaper arrived late. Normally, Samuel handled those little details. Details Ethan never appreciated until now. By afternoon, Daniel came downstairs, school bag slung over one shoulder. "Dad," he said quietly. "I'm taking the bus today." Ethan didn't even look up from his laptop. "You don't need to. I'll send a car from the company." Daniel shook his head. "No, Dad. I'll take the bus." There was a chill in his tone. Ethan looked up and saw something in his son's eyes. Disappointment. The same look his late wife used to give him when he put work above people. "Daniel," Ethan sighed, "I did what I had to do. He was careless." The boy's voice trembled. "Careless? He used to wait outside my school every single day, even when it rained. He cared more about this family than you do sometimes." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Enough, Daniel. Go to school." Daniel left without another word. The slam of the door echoed louder than Ethan expected. That night, Ethan wandered into the garage. The car Samuel used to drive gleamed under the soft light. Everything was spotless, just like Samuel always kept it. But then Ethan noticed something strange. On the dashboard was a small photo tucked behind the steering wheel, a faded picture of Ethan's late wife, smiling warmly beside a younger Daniel. Ethan froze. He didn't even know Samuel had that photo. He sat inside the car, running his hands over the steering wheel. On the passenger seat lay a small notebook, almost hidden under the seatbelt. Curious, Ethan opened it. Inside were meticulous records, fuel logs, maintenance dates, routes, but also handwritten notes like Daniel's therapy appointment, 3:30 p.m. Paid at clinic, no receipt. School donation for underprivileged students. Anonymous. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Therapy appointment? Paid? He hadn't approved any of this. He turned to the back page. There, in Samuel's neat handwriting, were words that stopped his breath. "As long as I live, I'll protect the boy. He reminds me of my own son, the one I couldn't save." Ethan's chest tightened. A lump formed in his throat. He leaned back in the seat, staring blankly at the ceiling. Who was his son? He whispered to himself. The following days felt heavier. At work, he couldn't focus. At home, Daniel barely spoke to him. Every night, Ethan found himself in the garage, rereading those words in Samuel's notebook. For the first time, the billionaire began to realize money had blinded him from the humanity around him, and though he didn't know it yet, the truth about Samuel's lateness was far more heartbreaking than he could ever imagine. It had been nearly a week since Ethan last saw Samuel. The guilt that started as a small ache had grown into something he couldn't escape. He tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting back to that old notebook, the line that said, "He reminds me of my own son, the one I couldn't save." Who was Samuel's son? And what did he mean by protect the boy? That evening, while Ethan sat in his study, staring at the notebook again, his phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number. He hesitated for a second before answering. "Mr. Ethan Cole?" a woman's calm voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "This is Dr. Maria Evans. I'm calling from St. Luke's Hospital. I believe you knew a man named Samuel Brooks?" Ethan sat up instantly, his heart skipping a beat. "Yes. Samuel was my driver. Is everything all right?" The doctor's tone softened. "Mr. Cole, I think you should come here. He's been in our care for a few days. I'm afraid he's not doing well." The words hit him like a punch. Ethan grabbed his coat and rushed out without another thought. When he reached the hospital, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and sorrow. A nurse guided him to a quiet ward. Dr. Maria met him at the door, her expression gentle but grave. "He collapsed 2 days ago," she said. "Severe exhaustion and internal complications. He'd been donating blood frequently, more than his body could handle." Ethan frowned. "Donating blood? For whom?" The doctor looked at him with a mixture of sadness and surprise. "Didn't you know? For a boy named Oliver, your son's classmate. The child's been battling leukemia. Samuel was his regular donor. He said he owed it to someone. Ethan's throat tightened. Owed it to who? The doctor hesitated. Your son, Daniel. Samuel told us he'd been secretly paying for Daniel's therapy after his mother's death. He wanted to make sure the boy never felt alone. He said you were too busy healing in your own way. Ethan's heart shattered. Every word cut deeper. His loyal driver, the man he'd humiliated, had been sacrificing his health and money for his son. He followed the doctor into the ward. Samuel lay weak on the bed, pale but peaceful, his breathing shallow. When he opened his eyes and saw Ethan, a faint smile appeared. Sir, Samuel whispered. You came. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. Why didn't you tell me, Samuel? Why didn't you just tell me the truth? Samuel gave a weak chuckle. Because kindness doesn't need an audience, sir. It only needs a purpose. Ethan held his hand, shaking with guilt and sorrow. I'm so sorry, Samuel. I should have listened. Samuel smiled faintly. You still have time to listen, sir. To him. To Daniel. Moments later, the monitor beside the bed beeped slowly, then fell silent. Ethan froze, holding the hand of the man he once fired, the man who had been saving his son's life all along. The silence in the hospital room was deafening. The steady beeping of the heart monitor had faded into a single flat tone that echoed through Ethan's chest like thunder. He stood frozen, his hand still clutching Samuel's lifeless fingers. Warm just moments ago. Samuel, he whispered, his voice trembling. Please, no. The doctor quietly placed a hand on his shoulder. He went peacefully, Mr. Cole. He didn't suffer. But Ethan barely heard her. He sank into the chair beside the bed, eyes wet, chest hollow. The man he'd shouted at, humiliated, and fired had been the one silently holding his world together. He looked at Samuel's face, peaceful, calm, as if asleep. And in that stillness, Ethan saw something he hadn't seen in years. Pure goodness. Later that evening, Ethan found himself outside the hospital, rain beginning to fall. He stood under the flickering streetlight, watching people hurry by, each lost in their own world. He thought about the years Samuel had quietly served him, always patient, always kind, and about the times he'd ignored him, spoken harshly, never once asking how he was doing. Guilt hit him like a wave. He called Daniel, his voice shaking. Son, can you come to St. Luke's? There was a pause. Why? What happened? Ethan swallowed hard. It's Samuel. He's gone. When Daniel arrived, his eyes were already red. He ran to his father, clutching Samuel's old cap that he had found in the garage. Dad, he said in a trembling voice, he was more than our driver. He was my friend. Ethan took a deep breath, barely able to speak. I know, son. I was too blind to see that. Daniel frowned through tears. He used to tell me stories about his own son. Said he wanted to make sure I never felt the pain. He did. Ethan's eyes widened. His son? Daniel nodded. He lost him years ago in a car accident. Said he was the same age as me. Ethan covered his face with his hands, his heart breaking all over again. I fired him for being late, and that day he was probably donating blood for someone's child, or helping another's soul. He looked up toward the gray sky and whispered, I'm sorry, Samuel. I'm so sorry. 2 days later, Ethan stood at the small cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The rain had softened into a mist, and only a handful of people were there. A few neighbors, a nurse from the hospital, and Daniel by his side. A simple wooden casket rested under a tree. No fancy flowers, no expensive coffin, just simplicity, just peace. Ethan stepped forward, placing Samuel's old driver's cap on the casket. His voice cracked as he spoke. For 12 years, you served this house like it was your own. I repaid you with anger. when all you gave me was loyalty. You taught me what true wealth means. Not the kind in bank accounts, but the kind that lives in hearts. I was too proud to see it, too blind to feel it. But today, I promise you, your kindness will not die with you." His voice broke as tears streamed down his face. Daniel reached out and held his hand, their fingers tightening in silent unity. As the casket was lowered into the ground, the sky cleared. A faint ray of sunlight piercing through the clouds, falling directly on Samuel's grave. Daniel looked up and whispered, "He's home now." Ethan nodded, wiping his tears. "Yes, son, and because of him, we've both found our way home too." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat in his study with Samuel's notebook in his lap. For hours, he reread those simple words. As long as I live, I'll protect the boy. When morning came, Ethan knew what he had to do. He opened his laptop and began typing. A proposal for something bigger than his business, bigger than himself. It would be called the Samuel Brooks Foundation, dedicated to helping drivers' families, underprivileged children, and anyone who gave more than they ever received. For the first time in years, Ethan smiled through tears. Maybe he couldn't change the past, but he could carry Samuel's kindness into the future. And in that moment, the billionaire finally understood what it truly meant to be rich. Months passed. The seasons changed, but Samuel Brooks's presence never left the Cole mansion. His old cap still sat on the passenger seat of Ethan's car. His notebook, the one filled with careful notes and quiet acts of kindness, rested on Ethan's desk like a sacred reminder. Ethan Cole was no longer the same man. The ruthless billionaire who once measured life in profits and deadlines now spent his mornings driving his son to school, in the very car Samuel used to drive. "Dad," Daniel said one morning as they stopped at a red light, "you're smiling again." Ethan glanced at him and chuckled softly. "Because I finally understand what happiness really means, son." A few weeks later, Ethan stood on a small stage at a community event in the heart of the city. Behind him was a banner that read, "The Samuel Brooks Foundation, spreading kindness, one life at a time." Families filled the room, drivers, single parents, children in school uniforms. Ethan adjusted the microphone and looked out at the crowd, his voice calm but full of emotion. "A few months ago, I lost a man I thought was just my driver," he began. "But Samuel Brooks was more than that. He was the silent strength behind my family, the man who protected my son when I couldn't, and the soul who reminded me that wealth means nothing without kindness." The audience listened in silence. Some wiped their eyes. Today, this foundation will help families like his. It will support children's education, health care, and the workers who often go unseen, the real heroes among us. He paused and smiled softly. "Samuel once told me kindness doesn't need an audience, but I think it deserves to be remembered." Applause filled the room. That evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, Ethan and Daniel visited Samuel's grave once more. A small plaque had been added beside it. "He drove a car but guided hearts." Daniel placed a bouquet of fresh white lilies beside the headstone. "I miss him, Dad." Ethan nodded, his voice gentle. "So do I, son. But he's still here, in every good thing we do." They stood there for a long moment, the breeze soft, the sky glowing orange. Ethan glanced at the horizon, whispering, "You kept your promise, Samuel. And now it's my turn to keep mine." Before you scroll, take a moment and tell us in the comments. What lesson did this story teach you today? And if Samuel's kindness touched your heart, subscribe to our channel because every week we share true and fictional stories that remind the world. Kindness costs nothing, but changes everything.